Winston! Shit. Oh God. Peggy.
Hey parents, Carmine here with your video review of Sleeping Dogs.
Out of here. Jeet. He doesn't deserve this. Winston. Winston!
I could list dozens, if not hundreds of games that take place in America. The list that take place in places like China, however, is significantly smaller, so it's always interesting to see what a game can make of the environment and culture of an entirely different nation. Sleeping Dogs lays out an excellent script that envelops the player in a Hong Kong triad. The player assumes the role of Wei Shen, an undercover cop, as he makes his way up the ranks of the Red Pole triad. The true depth of this narrative takes form as the lines between good and evil become blurred. There were plenty of times when I forgot that Wei Shen was an undercover cop, not because the game failed to include his police officer side, but because it made the triad members seem like real people. The gang members felt like real people with personalities, not the standard cardboard cutouts that many games and movies include. Sleeping Dogs was so well written that I had no idea how things would turn out until the final mission of the game.
You want me to make an example out of dog eye?
Violence in Sleeping Dogs will break down into two types. The player will use firearms in many missions, but the violence with these isn't bad. Enemies who get shot will show blood, but there isn't any gore caused by firearms. Shootout sequences on foot tend to end quickly. Shootout sequences in vehicles will be more common, but these include significantly reduced levels of violence. The player will shoot the tires out of enemy vehicles, which will subsequently crash and cause a fiery explosion. The player will engage in martial arts combat much more frequently. In these cases, the player will punch, grapple, and counter enemy attacks until everyone is knocked out. Some moves the player will engage in imply the breaking of bones, but enemies will always appear uninjured until they're knocked out. There are melee weapons the player can use, such as knives, but I never took many opportunities to stop and pick them up. The real violence comes almost exclusively towards the end of the campaign. There are plenty of occasions when the player can use the environment to perform special takedowns of enemies. Most of these involve amusingly non-violent actions like throwing enemies into dumpsters or phone booths. However, towards the end of the game, the takedowns become much more violent. There are occasions when the player can impale enemies onto growing bamboo shoots, grind their faces into air conditioning units, or other similarly bloody deaths. There isn't any gore, but that's replaced with copious amounts of blood. There are some more specific events to mention as well. At the end of the game, the player throws the final antagonist into an ice chipper and grinds him up. Again, gore isn't seen, but there is plenty of blood. The player also has to endure through an agonizing cutscene where the main character is brutally tortured. He has his leg drilled, foot smashed with a hammer, and is cut multiple times with the blade. Somehow he is able to escape and take down what remains of the triad.
That's the attitude that makes us strong.
Keep in mind, though, that most of the time the player will be driving to and from missions or performing relatively mundane tasks. The violence depicted previously is somewhat rare when taken in the full context of the game. That being said, we gave this game a recommended age of 16 years old. For the full written review, including the extra categories, log on to SideStoryGames.com.